Greetings, friends. The theme for this reflection is reimagining prayer. In other words, looking at the question, why do we pray? As in asking God for things through prayers of supplication or petition, or saying thank you to God. What is this for or about? The great German mystic Meister Eckhart said that if the only prayer you pray is thank you, that would be enough. Why would just that prayer be enough? Many of us grew up in households where we said grace before meals, and that can become quite rote and often empty, or a kind of superstition, a tick box exercise to keep God happy. And yet it's a wonderful opportunity for us to express gratitude. And I've been realizing that there's a deeper transformative element to expressing our thanks. And I've been working with this exercise, this practice of gratitude a lot recently. And I found that it's more of a practice or choice than a feeling. And Krista Tippett describes the practice of gratitude as a full-blooded, reality-based practice and choice. I love that description, a full-blooded, reality-based practice and choice. And Brother David Standel-Rust, who's well known for his emphasis on gratitude, describes gratitude as not a reaction to the present moment, because that would be something automatic, but a chosen response. So it isn't dependent on conditions, on circumstances, or on only good things happening. When we do make the choice to be grateful, this opens us to recognize and receive the already given gifts that come to us every day of our lives, every moment, even this breath, the gift of this nourishing, this beautiful breath. And this awakens us to a recognition of God's presence working in the whole of our lives. The practice of gratitude interrupts the malcontent that is fed by the media and that advertising depends on and manipulates in us. In this way, it's a way of disrupting the capitalist mindset that we so easily get slipstreamed along with. David Standel-Rust describes how gratitude rises quietly in our hearts like a vessel being filled. But in our culture, advertising makes us want more or bigger or better, and so we enlarge the vessel so that we can keep filling it with more. And so this gratitude never has a chance to overflow. And he describes it in this way. So instead of overflowing, we make the bowl bigger and bigger and bigger, and it never overflows. Never gives us this joy. This affluence inside means it always flows in and it doesn't overflow. It flows in and in and in and in and chokes us eventually. I think that's such a good description of the way we grab and feed ourselves and always want more, bigger, better. And that ends up just diminishing our joy. So from the perspective of spiritual transformation, allowing gratitude to simply arise and find expression shifts the cycle from wanting, competing, and craving, which reinforces our ego sense of lack, to a simplicity, receptivity, and contentment, which arises from a different place in us than our egos, a quieter, more inherently peaceful place, the spacious true self place in us. And this allows joy to start to overflow. A practice of gratitude can shift our mindset from old neural pathways of angst or discontent to begin to see what is new and possible in the moment. The conditions don't have to be wonderful or even desirable for us to be able to express gratitude. And this is called being grateful without conditions. And Joe Primo puts this in a nutshell: when we create conditions for being grateful, we limit our joy. And how often are we limiting our joy by placing conditions on the moment, conditions on our gratitude? Brother David Standel-Rust says, we cannot be grateful for all that a given moment brings us, yet in any given moment we can be grateful for something. The gift within the gift of any given moment is opportunity. And then he goes on to say, can you be grateful for everything? No, that's not what's expected of us. Not for everything, but in every moment. And a way of practicing gratitude is to stop what we're doing, pause for a moment, and express gratitude for whatever we see, hear, feel, or whatever we are encountering in the moment. So it's closely related to the practice of mindfulness in the way that it challenges our mental narratives and assumptions of what is happening, to actually looking and experiencing the moment we are in, even to begin to see the beauty around us, where previously we were so caught up in the issue, the problem, the challenge. And this applies to our emotions as well. Gratitude is not an attempt to override our difficult emotions. This is really important. We're not trying to confront our difficult emotions with gratitude, damn it. Rather, it involves pausing, acknowledging what is here with an open, welcoming sense of spirit towards it. And then letting go of the narratives that fuel that feeling of difficulty and widening our attention to an inner spaciousness that can also be aware of the fullness of the present moment. Often when we do this, and we really attune to what is here, we find a quiet joy intermingled with pain, or a gentle peace that accompanies our sorrow. And we open to more of the full spectrum of life, rather than just the tinted perspective that we had been caught in. Henri Nouwen wrote, "The choice for gratitude rarely comes without some real effort. But each time I make it, the next choice is a little easier, a little freer, a little less self-conscious. When gratitude becomes a more regular practice, it can begin to shift our way of relating to life, to others, and to God, and awaken us to the wonder and beauty of life, of what is already given. With practice, it becomes less of an effortful choice and more of an opening to the gentle gratitude that we discover is already there, arising within us. And this opens us to all that is gentle, calm, and contented in ourselves, that are gifts from the divine indwelling presence. And these are continually arising by grace within us, and all that we need is to open, to receive, and allow them to rise and find expression in and through us. And now I want to move on and look at prayers of request. And many of us have grown beyond that stage where we used to magically think that God would answer our prayers, favor our team over theirs, or whatever the case may be, kind of like hoping that a fairy godmother would come in and wave her magic wand. Those are the sort of childlike ideas of prayers. I remember praying fervently for a bicycle and then going and looking outside to see if it had arrived, and it didn't until some years later when my parents actually bought me one. And that's where I realized, no, prayers don't work in that magical kind of way. But still, when we find ourselves in difficult situations, so often there is this knee-jerk cry of help. And it's interesting to reflect on what it means when we cry out in this kind of way, help. It's not like we expect God to ride into our situation like a knight in shining armor and rescue us. I mean, that would be great. But I think we've all lived long enough to know that this is not how God works and this is not how prayer works. But to me, the power of this kind of prayer is the attitude that is evoked in us in that moment of calling out to God. Because it's an acknowledgement of our powerlessness to solve our own problems. And in so doing, we're letting go of our old habitual ways of trying to control or fix our lives and opening to a much vaster resource of wisdom. It's the ultimate prayer of surrender, really, that opens us to the wisdom of the Spirit, releasing our deeper capacity for insight that we are usually closed off to when we are churning away in our old conditioned neural grooves or trying to control or fix the moment. Rabbi Rami Shapiro wrote, "The more clearly you realize your lack of control, the more powerless you discover yourself to be, and the more natural it is for you to be surrendered to God. The more surrendered to God you become, the less you struggle against the natural flow of life. The less you struggle against the flow of life, the freer you become." And then he wrote, "Radical powerlessness is radical freedom, liberating you from the need to control the ocean of life and freeing you to learn how best to navigate it." I really love how he puts this. Radical powerlessness is radical freedom, liberating you from the need to control the ocean of life and freeing you to learn how best to navigate it. Our cries of helplessness are precisely this. If we can avoid reaching out for the nearest security blanket or religious formula, but if we remain with our vulnerability, opening to our radical powerlessness, we can begin to discover the freedom of surrender that allows us to respond with a deeper wisdom and be able to navigate in a fresh, new way that sees possibility. The act of calling out to God is also a moment of opening our hearts to a larger awareness of presence, God's presence with us in the situation. And this again can release us from the stuck patterns of help, I'm on my own, I'm stuck, and open us to a deeper heart tenderness and wisdom. And again, not so that we receive easy comfort or necessarily any solutions to our problem, as much as opening us to a more spacious and compassionate way of relating to our circumstances and to our own self, and opening to the already given love and presence of God. And then when we pray for others, this is also a way of opening our hearts in compassion and solidarity with them in their suffering. It's a way of forming a community of the Spirit as we hold one another in our hearts, like weaving a net of support that can hold us when we are struggling to hold ourselves. James Finlay encourages one to breathe in the love of God and then breathe it out to whoever you're praying for, and in this way touching the hurting places with love. And I've mentioned in previous talks, I'm really fascinated by the research that's being done on the non-local capacity of the heart to communicate and influence one another. And this supports the spiritual intuition that our prayers are much more than just platitudes, and are also not magic spells, but they are ways of placing our hearts in service of the wounds of each other and the wounds of the world. And this does call for prayers that are not merely lists of words, but that involve opening our hearts, becoming vulnerable, allowing ourselves to feel the hurt and suffering of others, even to allow our hearts to break as we open more and more to the pain of others and of our planet. As we break open, we're breaking into the holding, loving heart of God. Richard Rohr summed it up well when he wrote, "In our time, we have to find a way to disestablish ourselves, to identify with our powerlessness instead of our power, our dependence instead of our independence, and our communion instead of our individualism."